Welcome to All Home Care Matters, the show where we discuss all things home care, with discussions on important age-related matters and topics. Brought to you by Enriched Life Home Care Services, the #1 rated home care provider in Michigan by Top Rated Local.
Hello, and welcome back to All Home Care Matters. If this is your first time visiting us here at the show, we want to say thank you for taking time out to be with us today. We appreciate how valuable everyone's time is, and that's why we try and make each episode here at All Home Care Matters something that will hopefully matter to you. Today, we are honored to welcome a remarkable guest, pharmacist Kim Newlove. Kim is the founder of the podcast, The Pharmacist Voice, as well as a mother of a child with autism. Welcome, Kim.
Good to be with you.
Thank you. So, Kim, let's start a little bit with your background. I just welcomed you and explained that you're a pharmacist. You have the podcast, The Pharmacist Voice. But what we're going to really be talking about today is your child who was born with autism. Let's start there. Give us a little background.
Okay, well, a little bit about me, then we'll talk about how Craig entered the picture here. I am a pharmacist. I graduated from the University of Toledo College of Pharmacy in 2001. I became a voice actor in 2017. I started the Pharmacist Voice podcast in 2019. I am a wife. Okay, so I've been married for 20 plus years. I guess I should put out the real number to prove that I've really been married. Let's see, we got married in 2001. So that's 21, almost 22 years. And then let's see, I'm the mom of 2 teenage boys. Craig has autism. He's 19. Derek is neurotypical or typically developing. He is 17. And I'm a volunteer in the West Ohio area. Craig came into my story right after I graduated from college. I ended up having kids very early. So not even a year after I was married, I got pregnant. Had my first child when I was 24 years old. When he was 2.5 years old, excuse me, when he was 2.5 years old, I found out that he had autism. At that time, Derek was only maybe 5 months old. It was a crazy time. I was a new practitioner. I had a toddler with autism and I had a newborn. That's how Craig came into my life, right at the beginning of my professional career.
Wow. Did you have any experience? I mean, being in pharmaceutical school and becoming a pharmacist, there's not a lot of hands-on care, I can imagine. What was that like when you are trying to begin your professional career? You had the newborn, where as we all know, there's a lot of adjustment there, and now you have a son who's diagnosed with autism. What needs changed for him and for you and your family?
I laugh. That's nervous laughter. Things changed fast. I mean, I got married at 22, pregnant at 23, had my first kid at 24, second kid at 26. When you're experiencing a lot of change, what's one more thing, right?
Yeah, sure.
I know it's hard. Becoming a caregiver when you're not expecting to become a caregiver is hard. It's a challenge, but it's just one of many challenges in my life. My personality is such that I do well with challenges and I push back. Okay, that's what we've got here. This has a name. What can we do about this? And I try to do the best that I can with the information that I have. It was a challenge for sure to have a son with autism. Not only do we have a child with autism, but we have a typically developing child. It's like raising 2 different species of humans and doing the best that we can for each of them and helping them reach their full potentials. Both of them is what my job as a mom is. But what I didn't expect to do was to give up my clinical career, my full-time clinical career, to become a full-time caregiver. That's probably a statement that a lot of people listening will identify with. It's not something that we plan to do. It's just something we rise to the occasion to do. So I'll stop right there, see what questions you have.
Yeah, sure. So since he is now 19 years old, What different steps have you had to take now that he is technically considered an adult, or a legal guard, or, a legal adult himself now? Did you have to seek out a guardianship, or how does that work?
Yes, guardianship is something that I have. When when it's a situation where you have a child with a disability, and as a parent you kind of see it coming, right? Because it's a lifelong disability. You plan for it, right? We knew that our child would not be able to care for himself independently. Because of that, the estate planning attorney that we hired back in, I want to say it was 2005 or maybe it was 2008, very young. So he was probably 5 years old. This attorney told us when he becomes an adult, you will have to become his guardian. Thank goodness he prepared me for that when he was like a kindergartner, because if he had told me 2 months before he turned 18, I would have been overwhelmed. But actually seeing it coming was helpful. I know some of your listeners who become the guardian because of a sudden issue. They probably are not as prepared as what I was. Thankfully, I had our special needs estate planning attorney on my side, and I was able to get my son declared mentally incompetent and get the doctor's paperwork done. And let's see, what else did we have to do? We had to apply to the court system to become legal. I had to apply to become the legal guardian. My husband is not the legal guardian. It's just one person, and that's me. So we had to make that decision who's going to do it. Deciding who is the legal guardian is a bit of a challenge because, there's two adults in our household, my husband and me. Who's going to do it? It was recommended by our attorney that the person who attends the most doctor's appointments should be the legal guardian. That was So I became the legal guardian. I found the process to be rather smooth, again, because I saw it coming and I had help from a professional. I had all these years to plan, but I did have to go to court online because it was during the COVID pandemic, right? I did not see that coming. So all these very serious vows that you have to take to become the to commit to being the guardian, I had to do right here where I am right now. I don't think I had the screen behind me. I have a screen with my podcast logo on it. But yeah, I did it from right here in this chair, which I didn't expect. But then again, it kind of made me feel comfortable because this is my work environment. This is where I spend a
Your
lot of
comfort
time.
zone. Yeah.
It's my comfort zone. Yeah.
So for parents who may be listening or watching right now who have a child with special needs, and we'll use autism as the example, is this something that is probably recommended to them as well? Is this a just more of a formality when their child turns 18 because of the autism?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think that's a case by case
Case by case.
concern.
Okay.
I would say that you would actually really have to go to a doctor and give them the form. There's a form, right, to declare somebody mentally incompetent. And if you don't check all the boxes, well, your child might be able to fend for themselves in the real world. But for my son, he does not understand time and safety, money, employment, all the things that you really need to understand in order to support yourself independent of your parents.
Right.
I think that's a case by case issue. And I would definitely go by the form. I'm a very objective person. I like checklists, and I
Right.
would say go by the checklist, but I'm sure there's a way to get the checklist from the courts ahead of time so you can prepare mentally
Right.
and kind of gauge, am I going to need this or not? It's a great question because it's also a hard question to answer.
Right. Well, in being new parents, and we'll use your situation, your experience, you're able to offer all this information and support and kind of insight and tips, if you will, for families who may be going through this now. What did you find helpful when you first received this news?
When we first found out that our son had autism, the year was 2005. The internet was not quite what it is today.
Right. Right.
What I found helpful was finding people I trust and listening to them. That was the most helpful thing that I did. I found occupational therapists who ended up working with my son, speech therapists, special ed teachers, board certified behavior analysts. They were important for his education and also toilet training. Our son had a huge issue becoming toilet trained daytime and nighttime. Finding people that we trust and listening to them was incredibly important. Nowadays, I think there's a lot of great podcasts out there. I have one that I can recommend if you don't mind.
Yeah, recommend. Absolutely.
Okay, I'm going to pull it up on my smartphone right now. Sorry if that's bad form, Lance.
No problem.
The name of it is the Autism Blueprint Podcast with Janine Hershkovitz.
Okay.
She does a great job. Yeah, I believe she's a counselor, a family counselor in the state of Florida. And she also has an adult child with autism, a son, in fact, I believe. And she talks about a lot of the issues that I need to hear about. If I had had a newly diagnosed child, I would want to know about some of those issues and just kind of hear the vocabulary terms and the organizations that help. 3 organizations I would visit websites for would be Autism Speaks, the CDC, and the Autism Society. I don't have the websites right with me, but I'm sure you could put those in the show notes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely. Anything evidence-based. I would not go too much into the woo-woo stuff about diets and supplements and things that don't have a lot of evidence. As a medical professional, I just don't think that that is a safe thing to do. We like evidence-based everything in medicine. I would recommend that for any parent of a child with autism who is newly diagnosed.
Just curious too, Kim, having children myself, I see how they interact, and, our oldest was there for her 2 younger siblings, births. And how did your youngest son respond? Like, how has he adjusted through this period of, Craig, getting older and getting, more mature, but seeing, what he's going through and what you and your husband go through? How has it affected him, or has he adjusted well to it?
That's a great question. What was it like for Derek? Derek got a lot of benefits actually out of having a brother with autism. Because I had a son, my older son had autism, I chose to be a stay-at-home parent. My husband and I really decided for me to be a stay-at-home parent because of the cost of childcare. And also, nobody can replace you as a parent going out to get all that information from the occupational therapist, the speech therapist, the special ed teacher, the early intervention folks. I needed to be there, right? But because I was there, Derek got to see more of me. I didn't put my kids in daycare so I could have a full-time clinical career. That was a benefit. What else was it like? Because Craig has autism, we bought a lot of cool toys and went a lot of cool places. I'm trying to think of the benefits first. Derek got to make a lot of friends in the waiting rooms of the therapy centers, which I know probably doesn't sound like a benefit, but because he grew up with a brother with autism, my other son's first friends had autism, mental retardation, they had cerebral palsy, and any number of challenges. So my son Derek looks at kids with challenges as peers. It doesn't faze him. It's just different. That is definitely a part of the silver lining of having a brother with autism. But then all these sensory toys that we bought, we had a play set in the backyard with a swing set and a slide and the little fort thing. We did all kinds of blanket forts. He got to play with trampolines and sand and rice and beans. Kids usually eat the rice and beans, but we had sensory tubs and he got to play with these things. He had different sensory experiences. Craig had weighted blankets. Derek liked those too. He would crawl in bed with his brother. I would constantly read to Craig because I felt like it was part of his language development. Derek was right there too. We listened to a lot of music, and I feel like there was just more music and play and toys and time with parents in Derek's life because he had a brother with autism. As Craig has gotten older and Derek has gotten older, Derek's had friends and he's been in sports. Craig hasn't been that model for him. So one of the bad things is he doesn't have a brother to model behavior after. Like, oh, my brother went into this sport, I'll try that too. He hasn't had that. And then Craig has some, what do you call them? Self-abusive behaviors where he hits himself in the head sometimes, or sometimes he smacks others, like an open-handed smack. I don't like that it happens, but it does happen. That's one of the bad things about having a brother with autism. And if that happens in a restaurant while we're trying to eat, we're waiting for food, Craig's being impatient, Derek is embarrassed. So that's one of the negative things for sure. But there is good along with the bad. It's not all bad, but there are challenges. And depending on the personality type of all the people in your family, you're going to look at it a certain way. I don't think Derek looks at it as all bad.
Okay. How does Craig respond to Derek?
Craig loves Derek.
Yeah. Okay. So they have a close relationship.
I would say they have a close relationship, but as they've gotten older, it's more complicated. For sure. Yeah. And Derek drives a car and Craig loves to go for rides in a car. That has been like a special thing for them. For me as a mom to watch my younger son drive off with my older son, I'm so proud.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah.
That's fun. And Craig just loves Derek, not just because he can drive a car, but because I think Craig looks up to Derek.
Right.
And Derek is actually the bigger brother. He's the taller brother. So there's just some interesting twists and turns in life that end up being kind of great.
So you mentioned how, your estate planning attorney had warned you years ago that you'll at some point need to petition for guardianship of Craig. And you said you like that, being able to kind of foresee the future, if you will, to prepare yourself, brace yourself, and be ready for it when it happens. Have you considered what it might be like if Derek decides to leave for college and how that might affect Craig?
Yes, I smile because I'm proud that Derek is going to go to college, and we live in the Toledo, Ohio area. Derek will likely go to the University of Cincinnati in Cincinnati, Ohio. If you know Ohio geography, it's like a 3-hour drive. It's far enough. It's close, but it's still far away. It's not like we could just drive there and drop off cookies and come back.
Well, I heard there's a good school in Ann Arbor too, you might want to consider.
There is, but I don't want to pay out-of-state tuition, Lance.
I think don't Toledo residents, there's something, or is it University of Toledo? I know we're kind of going off the trail here, but University of Toledo, you can get in-state rates if you're coming from Michigan. I don't know if there's any reciprocal thing in Michigan for Ohio residents.
That's an interesting comment. I think Eastern Michigan University.
Okay.
Yeah, which I think is in Ypsilanti, right?
Yeah, 5 minutes, if that, from Ann Arbor. Yeah.
Yeah, but you can't beat the engineering program at the University of Cincinnati. They have a great co-op program.
Okay.
And yeah, that'll lead hopefully to some connections and experience that'll help him as a graduate. He wants to go into architectural engineering.
Oh, wonderful. That's great.
Yes. So we have, thought about how it's going to affect Craig, and we talk about it, and there's no escaping it. It's going to happen. Social stories are so helpful. Do you know about social stories?
I don't, maybe if you explained it, I might. It doesn't ring a bell though.
Okay. Social stories are basically just telling a story to the person for whom you care.
Okay.
And helping them understand from start to finish what's going to happen in this situation. For example, the dentist office. We're going to drive to this place and park our car at this building you've never seen. We're going to go inside, check in, sit in the waiting room. Then the dentist is going to call you back. So you're going to walk over to the chair and sit down. They're going to recline you. They're going to count your teeth and touch your teeth. And when you're done, you get a new toothbrush and you can leave and go back to your car. Having a story like that helps them understand. You better believe there's going to be a social story for Derek going off to college.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, so let's talk a little bit about some of the myths and misconceptions that people have about being a caregiver, and even specifically about having a child with autism. Because I feel like there's a lot of, myths out there, misconceptions, and, half facts and, half fallacies. So what would you want people to know are really the facts and what the myths are about having a child with autism and being a caregiver for one?
Okay. I would say the number one myth or misconception is that you know how to do it right out the gate. because you don't.
Right.
You don't. If you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism, much like anybody that you've had on your show. There's probably not a single one that duplicates another.
Right.
They're all different, right?
Yeah. We had,
And
just to touch on that, Kim, we had a mother on who had a child with Williams syndrome. And what I found fascinating about it, being a child, obviously, we're all children and had parents, but then also being a parent, is that she let her child go through his entire academic, undergrad, not undergrad, but, elementary, middle school, high school career, all the way up until he turned 18 without ever letting him know he had this situation. And I've often wondered, if I was in that situation, would I want my child to know, or would I want to kind of shield them from it? And I can see both sides of that argument. One, she didn't want him to be labeled and to feel different, and to, maybe fall back and use that as an excuse to get out of things, or not to, live up to their best potential that they're capable of. But then I can understand it from a parent's side. You don't want that child to be singled out or to feel different around other children. What do you think about that?
I think there's pros and cons of each. That's a great question. And I think part of it depends on your personality as an individual. Like, how hard do you want to have to make your life? Because diagnoses lead to treatment and services. I think we can all agree, without a diagnosis, it's often hard to get treatments, recognized treatments for that diagnosis. For example, with autism, my son didn't get access to the Ohio Autism Scholarship Fund until he got his diagnosis, and we went down that road with education. I can only imagine how financially strapped people will be if they do not get a diagnosis, and the diagnosis gets them entrance into the services and the money, the pots of money. So that's a very individual choice. I would say that the pros of getting that diagnosis is access. The con would be not getting access. I don't know why anybody would think that that is in the best interest of their child. That is a very personal decision. I don't judge them. I think they're going to have to work a lot harder to get money and services.
Okay.
I'll leave it at that. I think I could probably go off on a lot of tangents about a lot of different topics there,
Sure.
but
Sure.
I'll leave it at that.
And so for you yourself, I don't know if adjusted is the right word, but you're adapting as, the needs change and things. And what do you still struggle with as being a caregiver for Craig?
Oh, I struggle with getting caregivers so I can get a break and so I can work. I would say those are the biggest struggles that I have. And also for my husband and me to get away on a vacation, to
Right.
feel like we have 24 to 48 hours away from him. We love Craig very much and we want the best for him, but we can be the best for everyone if we get away from time to time.
Sure.
We used to have a fantastic team before the pandemic. The pandemic screwed a lot of stuff up.
Right.
We had a team of 4 or 5 caregivers, and I would make a schedule. It was amazing. And I would think up all these dates and times that I needed help, and I would put it out to the person with the most seniority. They would pass it back to me, and I would go down my list, and eventually I would have pretty much all my needs met. One of the struggles that we currently have, other than just finding people who are available, is we have aging parents ourselves. We are not at the point where we're caregivers for our parents, but it's increasingly difficult for them to be caregivers for our son.
Right. Yeah. And, as we all know, they may need a caregiver a lot sooner than expected, because the thing of it is, we never planned for it. You can't really prepare for it, and you don't know when it's going to happen, and, so hopefully they, will have good health for a long time to come yet for you guys and for themselves. What would you say has been some of the biggest rewards you've gotten out of this unexpected role as being a caregiver for Craig?
This is going to sound selfish. Is it okay if I go the selfish route?
Go selfish, absolutely.
Okay. One of the things selfishly that I get out of it, or that I have gotten out of it, one of the big rewards of being a caregiver has been that time as a stay at home parent. I didn't expect when I went through pharmacy school that I would be a stay at home parent. And some amazing things have happened just by trusting that that was the right thing to do for our family. We learned how to live off of one income. A lot of financial planners will tell you learn to live off of one income, and then anything above and beyond that you can use to pay off debt, go on vacations, give, whatever you want to do with it. We actually did it because of autism. That was one of these hashtag gifts of autism. We ended up paying off our house and being like so serious about paying off debt because we always had bills for Craig's treatments and education. We didn't want to be in debt. So we were highly motivated to do all these things that financial planners tell you to do. We actually did them. So that was amazing. One of the other rewards, I would say, is that we had more time as a family. A lot of pharmacists work evenings, weekends, and holidays. I only worked part time. I mean, sometimes I worked an evening or a weekend or a holiday, but not as often as other people. And because of that, we got to go to church regularly as a family. That was important to us.
Absolutely.
That's a huge reward. I can't put a price on family time and raising your children in the church. There's so many people that will skip because one member of the family is absent. There's not a lot of times that we skipped on purpose. Other rewards, we had a lot of fun. We made it a point to try to engage Craig and be engageable for him, like piggyback rides and having fun toys around the house, playing the music that he liked, taking him to all the therapy things, enacting the stuff at home. I mean, the rewards from carrying that out was smiles and engagement and progress. We now have a child who we invested a lot of time in. We invested a lot of time in having him learn how to ride a bike because we invested in the Lose the Training Wheels camp, which is a real thing. It's something that I think is called I Can Shine now. Anyways, you send your child there when he's 8 years old. They teach him how to lose the training wheels. A lot of kids with autism never learn how to ride a two-wheeled bike without assistance. We can take our family on bike trails. We went to Mackinac Island in Michigan and rode bikes around. We took our bikes across on the ferry because we invested that time. The reward is we can go on vacations and bring our bikes. And he looks like everybody else. He wears a helmet, he rides under his own power, he brakes under his own power. There's so many rewards, but a lot of it is finding those people that you trust and listening to them and doing a lot of the things that they recommend. You get rewarded if you do things right.
Is he is it a situation where, like, in the nice weather, summer, because we're in the Midwest, so not now, but could he go out and ride his bike around the neighborhood? Would you feel comfortable? Is that something he's able to do?
Yes, he can ride his bike around the neighborhood, but somebody has to go with
Oh
him.
yeah. Okay.
Definitely. But
Sure.
he can do it, and that's amazing.
So I mean that's a tremendous accomplishment. And I haven't spent a lot of time with a lot of families who have been dealing with autism, just a few, and I don't know of any that can ride a bike without training wheels. So I think that's fascinating, and just I think a testament to the devotion that you and your husband and family have, committed to, helping Craig achieve what he's able to achieve. So
Well, thank you.
you're welcome. What else have you accomplished in your role that you think people should know about?
Oh man, finding this cool part-time job that I can fit into the margins, being a voice actor and a podcast host. I'll tell you, raising somebody who has struggled for 2 decades to use his own voice has really inspired me to use mine. It's so much like when you see a marathon runner who's pushing their child's wheelchair through a
Yeah.
race. I mean, because my son cannot talk, I really appreciate my own voice. And I'm not saying I have the prettiest, best, healthiest voice in the world, but I can speak confidently
Right.
and trustworthy in a trustworthy way that some people will pay for. I have found something that I can do because I can't be in traditional clinical practice because I have childcare issues. He has taught me grit. I have honestly learned to be gritty, like not give up and find a way to do things and think ability first. Anybody listening to this as a caregiver really needs to know, no matter what you do, think ability first. If you think that you are being pinned down by life circumstances, think ability first. If you're little and they're big, what can you still do? It's a David and Goliath story completely.
Absolutely.
But there's so many things that you can do. So people need to know, think ability first. You think you're down for the count? No way. There's still life in you as a caregiver. Being a caregiver is not your only identity.
Yeah, and so many times they feel like that is their identity. And we just did a topic not too long ago that I think far too often caregivers don't plan ahead, and it was called When the Caregiving Ends. Because you become so absorbed into that identity of being a caregiver, you're not thinking about the next steps when that day comes when you're no longer needed as a caregiver and you're left really isolated, So was Craig the reason you started the Pharmacist Voice?
Craig inspired me to start this business. Yes. Not in so many words. He can't talk, right? He can't read, write, or speak. He does use a communication device, but he didn't use his communication device to tell me to start this business.
Okay.
When I was between jobs, I would take a job every once in a while to not just pay the bills, but also to flex my clinical muscles, if you can imagine that.
I understand that. Yeah.
I was between jobs and I was thinking, well, what's next? Because somebody that needed me to be her relief pharmacist left her job. There was no reason for me to stay. And I left the job. I'm laying in bed with Craig at bedtime, reading to him. And I thought, boy, my son really likes it when I read to him. I wonder if there are any medical people who would like it if I could read to them. And that's kind of how it started. I thought, I'm my son's voice. Maybe I could be someone else's voice too. And I wanted to connect my background as a pharmacist with my speaking voice. And that is how my business was named, basically, the Pharmacist Voice. It came very organically because of that desire to use my background as a pharmacist and my speaking voice.
So let's look at this too, Kim. So the Pharmacist Voice, which is tremendous, and we'll have a link to it in our show notes.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. That was a result of your caregiving for Craig. What else has come as a result that maybe if Craig had not been born with autism, where would Kim be at today?
Oh man, Kim would be a completely different person.
Right.
I would.
What other things was a direct result? Like any, significant things as a result of Craig?
This is going to sound maybe a little strange. This is not a professional thing. Feel free to.
Doesn't have
Okay.
to. Yeah.
I wouldn't have as many pictures and videos. 100%. When you have a child with autism, for example, and this doesn't go for all caregivers, but when you have a child with autism, they learn through pictures. You learn how to speak their language, right? I learned how to speak his language. I now speak in pictures. That may not sound like it has to do with having a bunch of pictures, but there's two things I want to say here. We have a lot of pictures and videos, not just of Craig, but of everybody, because we would make picture cards to communicate with Craig about things. Those social stories, that's a great example. But then I want to say that a lot of other people understand pictures too. I didn't understand how much weight I didn't realize how much other people learned through pictures as well. PowerPoint, Microsoft PowerPoint as an app, for example, is a great example. When you put up a picture, just a single picture, and you're speaking about something, and people are staring at that picture, you activate the theater of the mind. They are then in your story based on whatever picture they're being shown. In any social media that I post, I try to put a picture. It's because of Craig. Okay. That has been one of the things that has come out of this professionally, I guess. I now speak in pictures, even when I'm doing something for my podcast. if I have a post, I make sure to put the picture of the guest in that post because people learn through pictures. They want to know, what does that person look like? And if they're in a military uniform, that may catch their eye. That may be, what do you call it? Clickbait.
Sure.
Somebody wants to click on it because they see something they're interested in. But anyways, it's really taught me that everybody learns through pictures.
Okay. Remarkable. What can you tell me about succession planning? Because we kind of have touched on it here and there, but for somebody who may just be starting out on this journey, caregiving, either for, a spouse, a parent, or more specifically in this situation, a child, what do you recommend and what would you suggest they do for succession planning? Like if something, heaven forbid, something happened to you and your husband, what's the succession planning for Craig?
I would say start early and review your plan often.
Mhm.
That's great advice. We started when Craig was 5 years old back in 2008. Our succession plan is, I don't want to get too personal here,
No,
but
that's okay.
if I die, my husband is my successor. And then if both of us die, then I believe my dad is the successor. As our parents age, I mentioned we have aging parents, the succession plan will change.
Right.
In our neighborhood, there's actually a young lady who at the age of 17 lost her mom. 4 months later, she lost her dad. She was adopted from Vietnam. She had no family in the United States. Her extended adopted family did not want to be part of the succession plan. Their succession plan was to have someone from a bank, a lawyer, make the choices. And for some time, that lawyer did make the choices, but she was living in, let's just say, a home for a while. Not an old folks' home, but a home for teenagers who have challenges, a respite home. Eventually, she got adopted by one of the teachers in our community who had taught her. It was an amazing story.
Wow.
Not everybody is that lucky.
Right.
So we as parents can see what happened to our friends. They died and they left their daughter, and that happened to her. We don't want that to happen. So as our parents age, we need to continue to revisit the plan. So plan early and revisit it often. That would be my advice.
Okay. Yeah. And one thing that always concerns us professionally and with some of the people that we speak with here on the show is the loneliness that comes with being a caregiver. And with loneliness, sometimes depression can set in. Sometimes it's usually not necessarily chemical, but more situational. But you're always caring for someone else. What do you recommend to help people who might be feeling that loneliness, that isolation, even hopelessness, to kind of get through to the next day, if you will? What's your recommendation to them?
Okay, this is a great question, very heavy topic for sure. But I would say that through my church, there was a program put on by the hospice organization here in Northwest Ohio. It's the Hospice of Northwest Ohio. They put on this caring for the caregiver class. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not with that specific one, but yeah, we actually facilitate. Well, pre-COVID, we were facilitating 4 or 5 different caregiver support groups, and in fact, in January, we're relaunching a new group at our church because now COVID has kind of relaxed a little bit, thankfully, and yeah, it's a very 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 needed resource though for sure.
Yes, I would suggest one of those classes, caring for the caregiver or joining a support group. And though it's the word support group is in the title, it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody's sitting around with a box of tissues and
Right.
crying. You don't realize you need support until you go there. And these people really speak your language and you can relate to them. And I must say that I do sometimes find it difficult to go to support groups for my son's disability, autism support groups. But going to that class at my church that was caring for the caregiver gave me a lot of ideas. Even though it was for people who had terminal illnesses, it gave me a lot of ideas about how, even though the people it was intended for were caring for somebody who would have an end to their suffering, my son would need a caregiver for his whole entire lifespan. And I needed to think about that. And I didn't even realize that until I went to that class. So things like that, support groups, classes, they'll get your mind thinking about all kinds of things: social security income, Medicaid, estate planning, guardianship, all these things that other people, not just parents of children with autism, go through. It was very helpful. Highly recommend.
Yes, absolutely. And I just want to touch on that a little bit further. In your situation, it was a parent for a child. In a lot of other situations, it's a child for a parent, sometimes for a spouse. But one of the things that these groups and these classes really can offer people is a feeling of community. Because I don't know how it was in your situation for your husband and yourself, Kim, but when you first got that diagnosis, you mentioned you guys, you had Craig very young, very early in your marriage. You probably, I'm guessing, and I could be wrong, didn't have a lot of friends who were going through something similar, right? So they can't, they can be an ear to listen to, they can be a friend, call me if you need anything, but it helps to have somebody else who actually knows and has experienced it, or they're living it firsthand, to truly identify with you, right? Isn't that one of the benefits as well? Or was it for you?
Of course. Well, for me, it took a long time to develop those relationships. You talked about, sorry, I just bumped my desk. You talked about early on, I had kids. I did not have a whole lot of friends in general that had children when I was 24. So I will agree with you on that. And then to throw in the mix, to have a child with autism, then we're talking about a very small section of the pie,
Right. Right.
of people that would even understand. Back when he got diagnosed in 2005, social networking wasn't a thing. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all the things. People barely had websites. People barely had stuff on their websites. For social networking, we did it the old-fashioned way. You meet people at playgrounds, therapy centers, and then I had a mom's group that I was part of when I first had Craig, before I even found out that he had autism. There were just moms raising kids, and these were mostly stay-at-home parents. Although I got along best with the people who worked at least part-time or full-time, because I think my personality kind of matched them. I'm just a driven person. Having that outlet was really fun. These were people raising normal children or typical children. They were fun too. And that was good for my younger son, Derek.
Back in about 2003, 2004, when you had Craig, the improvements in the understanding, and I hesitate to say acceptance, but maybe even acceptance of autism, I feel like has come a long way since then. Would you agree with that, or is that a myth?
I would say that the frequency of diagnosis has increased. Back when Craig got his diagnosis, I think 1 in 55 children had autism. Nowadays, I don't know if it's 1 in 60. The statistics have changed. Because of that, I would agree with you, awareness is better.
Okay.
But still, I think even having a child with autism and knowing other parents, we don't all agree on treatment
Okay.
and things that we need to do. Some people are really heavily into the gluten-free, casein-free diets. I don't judge them. If that works for their child, great. That was not the solution for us. So then there's friction between you and these people who say it's all diet, it's all immunizations, all these things. They rub me the wrong way. And I have to distance myself from them because mentally I will have a hard time being their friend if I disagree fundamentally with how they treat their child. So finding the right group of people who kind of agree with what I did and the philosophies that I adopted, that was very helpful to me.
Mhm.
A lot of the caregivers that listen to this probably can identify with that because, it kind of depends on whatever diagnosis their loved one is suffering from. But you'll meet all kinds of people who say, this is the treatment you have to do. And other people say, no, this is. And if you can't even, agree on that fundamentally, it's hard to get support from them.
Sure.
So it's almost like
Is that the
niching down. You got to
Yeah,
niche down.
is that the biggest I don't know what the right way of explaining it. So it's like factions within a faction, right? You have the anti-vaxxers, then you have the pro. Is that the biggest source of conflict or pain point, if you will, with the community, with families with autism, or is there other
That's a
ones?
good question. There are other ones. There are families that don't believe in something called applied behavior analysis, or ABA. So it's basically a treatment type where you drill people for skills. A lot of people that disagree with it complain that it's like training a dog. You teach a dog a trick, then you give them a treat. And for my son, that's the only way that he could learn how to go to the bathroom in a
That's
toilet.
how we rewarded our children when they were being potty trained. You know, if you go like a big boy or a big girl on the potty, you can get a couple of Skittles or an M&M or something.
Fundamentally, there's some people that feel like they're treating their child like an animal and they just don't agree with it. So that's another problem. So it's not just the anti vaxxers, there's the people that don't agree with certain diet strategies. They think you have to go gluten free, casein free, dye free, organic, natural, this and that. There's a lot of children on the spectrum who limit their diets. If you have ever talked to somebody who has to puree food, you know, that's that's a diet limitation right there. There are some kids who have texture issues. They'll only eat purees. They grew up on that when they were babies. They never gave it up. So
That's
then that being gluten-free, casein-free, natural, dye-free, whatever, can be impossible when your child limits their own diet and they're like, "No, I won't do that." Or they'll hit you if you try to give them something. I It's really hard to raise a child with certain sensory issues.
and I can so but what I'm trying to wrap my head around though is if you're at a park, you know, with Craig and let's say there's another family there with their son or daughter and they're of the mindset or they follow a certain philosophy on the dietary, right? And if let's say you don't necessarily agree with that dietary and they knew that, are they that avid about it that you would be shunned by them and outcast? Like, well, you can't be a part of our clique because of that? I mean, is it to that extreme?
Well, it depends on what they want to talk about. Again,
Okay.
personalities really come into this.
Right.
There's a mom that I can't stand to be around because she's an anti-vaxxer and she's really into the diets. And that's what she wants to talk about. And it's almost like she's in sales and she wants to sell you what her child's doing. And if you don't agree to it, she doesn't want to talk to you.
Wow.
So, what you just talked about, I have met people like that, but it's not always like that because not everybody shows all their cards at the same time. So it just depends. Now, there's some of us who prefer to interact with people who have typical children instead of mostly people with challenges. I'm not saying I'm one of them. I have a good mix, but there are some people who would prefer for their child to be the only child with challenges that among all of their friends, if you know what I mean.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So some people choose not even to interact with other people who have children with challenges. There's all kinds out there. And I'm not saying anything's wrong, but these are things that
Just
I've noticed over the years.
yeah. To me that's just disheartening because I would think, you know, going through something of having a child with autism or any sort of special need would you would think it would bring community together rather than cause division, right? Because you all are typically experiencing a lot of the same situations and you would think you would want to rely and, you know, support each other rather than try to drive each other apart.
I know
But
what you're
that's
saying.
an outsider perspective though. So I'm just speaking from the outside, of course.
Yeah, I don't want to disagree too much with you here, but there is a mom that recently, I don't want to say she put her foot in her mouth, but she started some really aggressive comments against teachers in the community. And when asked, how did these comments help your child on the spectrum, she wanted to talk like have a pity party and play the victim card and get a bunch of pity instead of addressing the concern. Like we're all in this to help our children who are on the spectrum. So we're just trying to help you here. You just defamated all these teachers. You said terrible things about them, but what does your child get out of it? I mean, really, we know what these teachers are capable of. You feel wronged. We don't see the same thing you see. How does making these comments help your child on the spectrum? And these people like this, they kind of poison the well for the rest of us. We don't want to interact with them. It's hard. It's hard. It makes us not want to interact with others who have children on the spectrum sometimes.
Did Craig and this other parent, did you guys all utilize the public school system, or what did you do
Yes.
educational? Okay.
Yep.
What was your
Yep.
experience like? Yours?
All right. Our son has autism, right? There's no cure for autism. I think we can all agree with that. Our our experience with the school system was such that he has never fully gotten all of his needs met, but it's because there's no cure for autism. It's not like they have the cure for autism, excuse me, and they're dangling it in front of us and they won't give it to us. Nobody's got the cure for it. So, what we have to do is work as a team. We have to identify the skills he needs to work on, and we have to figure out as a team the best way to work on those skills. I have found that the public school system is not perfect, but nothing is.
Thing is, right. Right. So if you had to go back after going through it, because now he's, 18, 19, I'm assuming he is now done with his education? No. Okay.
In Ohio, kids can stay until the age of 22.
Oh, okay. And that may
But
be
yeah,
the case. I'm not sure what our guidelines are. Would you go through it again, or would you seek other sources?
I would do almost everything the same way over and over again, but I would probably advocate harder. I would follow up closer. It's good to make the plans early and revisit them often, just like I said with the other thing, estate
Succession.
planning and succession plan. Yes, early and often. I think that's what early intervention is all about. You get to the problems, the gaps, the skills that are needed early. You revisit them often. The school can only do so much. We have to reinforce what they do at school at home. That's only fair. But if we don't ask for quarterly reports or go to meetings or ask for work samples, we're not going to know what's going on. So they have a responsibility to do certain things, and we have a responsibility to do certain things.
Sure.
And if either one of us drops the ball, who suffers? Craig. So, yeah, the public school system it's fine. But again, as a team, we all have to find the goals that he needs to work on, the skills that he needs to have, and we both need to work on them, and we both need to follow up. And if at any time I drop the ball and I get busy with something else and I don't follow up, I've missed an opportunity to help the school, to help my son be the best he can be. We're all just trying to help him achieve his full potential.
Absolutely. And it sounds like you guys are doing a tremendous job, Kim. I just want
Oh,
to say
thanks.
again, it's very commendable, and I just really respect what you and your husband have done and what you are doing for Craig. Just a couple more questions and we'll wrap up. What
Okay.
if you had to go back in time, and you kind of already mentioned this, that there's not a lot you would do differently. What would you want to tell Kim 18 years ago?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would probably tell Kim 18 years ago to enjoy the journey as much as possible and follow up and have plans, because at first I wasn't good at that. I would say, I wish that I could tell myself, if you just have a plan and you keep following it, it's going to be okay. At first, I was just all over the place. I didn't have the internet and I didn't know which resources and I didn't know who to trust and what to listen to. And I wish I just could have had it all in a book so I could turn the pages and just follow the plan. I was a little disorganized at first. I am much more organized and a better planner now. I think it just would have given me a lot of peace to have that plan and be following it. I didn't realize how, excuse me, I didn't realize what peace of mind checklists give me. And just having all the information in one place and being able to follow a plan gives me a lot of peace of mind. I didn't know myself. So I think I would have helped my younger self know myself better so that I could experience a little bit of peace and to understand that it's going to be okay if you just follow the plan. There's a lot that I could have done better, if I would have known about it sooner.
Sure.
But I mean, who can know? You just can't know. Hopefully, somebody out there listening will know better what to do for their child by listening to me. And I do have a podcast episode. It's number 147. It's about autism awareness and acceptance. It's basically what I did with my son from age 2.5 when he got diagnosed until present, which I think he was 19 by the time I did that episode. Might be one for parents of children with autism to check out.
Well, we'll include the link in here and maybe put it up on the screen. Um, what about your husband? What was how did he handle? Because men and women are sometimes very much different. How did he process and kind of accept this and adapt to it? Was he as adaptable as you were, or did he handle it differently?
I think he was on Team Craig, as we call it, from right in the beginning.
Okay.
He's a good dad. He's a good man. Is he perfect? No.
None of us are.
I'll tell you, when we first got the diagnosis, it was September 6th, 2005. It's a day that I will never forget. And it's not because it was sad or anything like that. It's just the day we got an answer to a question we've been asking, like, why does he struggle so much? That day, my husband had to leave for a business trip and he had to go to North Carolina for the rest of the week, I think Tuesday through Friday. He was in training for something called Six Sigma Black Belt. He's a mechanical engineer. He loves a plan, loves to follow a plan. And his plan was to get on that plane and go, no matter what we found out at the doctor's office. During that week, I made a million phone calls. I listened to the audio tape of the doctor giving my son the diagnosis and all of our follow-up. And I made a plan, basically, because that's what pharmacists do. We need a checklist, okay? And you asked, how did he do with things? Once I made a list of all the things we needed to do, his engineer brain kicked in and he was able to help me with it. But more than anything, autism's more than a word, a diagnosis. It's something our child has. He's a child first, then he's a child with autism. So he was right there. He was the same dad to Craig that he was before. But once we found out, we needed to include more sensory input to Craig to get engaged with him and get him to smile at us and want to be with us. He was wrestling with him and, we bought a trampoline. We were doing all these fun things. There was so much that he was on board with just because I think he understood and because we're a team and I helped him understand and he always treated Craig as a child first. I think he was on board and he did a great job. Is he perfect? No. Am I perfect? No. But as a team, we do the best we can. We bring out the best in each other.
That's wonderful. And just to go back on Derek, if thinking back, and maybe there's not a moment, is there a moment though where Derek came to you or your husband and asked, is something wrong with my brother? Or how did he first learn of, Craig and having autism?
Oh boy, I think Derek I think Derek always knew.
Okay. Okay.
I think Derek grew up in the waiting room of therapy centers.
Okay.
I mean, he really knew that Craig had the same issues that a lot of the other kids in the waiting room had. Now, when Derek got a little bit older, I think he wanted to do the typical thing that typical kids do, which is stay at home on his own so he could do his own thing, like play video games or go over to a friend's house or whatever. I don't think that's any different from what a typical kid would do at the age of 10. I think he just made his choices because Derek's Derek. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I was just curious because if, somebody watching or listening maybe have, siblings, and if they're not as acutely aware as to there being any sort of thing different about their brother or their sister, what advice would you give them for how to have that conversation? Would you include the doctor? Would you talk to them in a certain way? How much would you divulge as far as what it is going on?
That's a great question. And I would probably take stock of who we're dealing with.
Sure.
If it were Derek at the age of 2.5, Craig was 2.5 when he got his diagnosis of autism. Derek was a baby. Okay. Yeah. So if you're talking about a toddler finding out, I would probably just know my child and know that he's a smart cookie. And I would use kid terms, of course, and I would come to his level and I would say, hey, we got to talk. And, and I would keep in mind very intensely, what is in it for Derek? we need to communicate this message, but what's in it for Derek? How is he going to use this information? And why is it important for him to know? So I would keep that really at heart. Now, if it's more like an older child who's 10 years old and is in school, then I would probably do something, especially because it's a boy. Boys, Lance, y'all like written information. I can't tell my husband to do something, but if I put a sticky note on his steering wheel, he's going to do it. So anyways, I would take advantage of the strengths of a 10-year-old boy. They don't like talking to their moms. So I would probably put a note on the toilet seat or something like that. So he's like, oh, this must be important. I'd get his attention, but I'd use humor too. And, I would just think of the child, the age, the gender, what he responds well to, what's in it for him, all that stuff. And I would be creative because I'm kind of a creative person.
Sure. Okay. Good information. And the last thing I want to leave us viewers and listeners with is this question, Kim. What would be the one piece of advice you would want families to know about having a child with autism? And then what is the one piece of advice you'd want to let families know who have a child with autism?
Okay. Find people you trust and listen to them. Human resources are the best resources. What was the other question?
And then for families who may have typical children, what's the one thing you want them to know about families who have children with autism or children with autism?
For a typical child, I would say it's okay for your typical child to have their own reaction to the situation.
Okay.
I think I got lucky with Derek that he was raised with autism and he just understood it.
Wonderful. Well, I just thank you so much, Kim, and appreciate your time and sharing you and your family's story and sharing Craig's story with us. And we'll look forward to maybe talking to you again in the future.
All right. Thanks for having me on today. Take care. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us today here at All Home Care Matters. All Home Care Matters is here to help families as they navigate these long-term care issues. We invite you to visit us at allhomecarematters.com, where there's a private, secure, fillable form where you can give us feedback, show ideas, or if you have questions. Every form is read and responded to. And remember, you can listen to the show on any of your favorite podcast streaming platforms or watch the show on our official YouTube channel. Just make sure to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode. We'd also like to say thank you again to Kim Newlove for joining us today here at All Home Care Matters. Thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to you joining us again on another episode of All Home Care Matters. To learn more about the show and to connect with us, visit us at allhomecarematters.com.